Well, hello, Desert Hills. As we prepare ourselves for the Reformation conference that we're going to be holding on October 27th and October 28th, it might do ourselves well to ask ourselves, what was the Reformation? And by that, we're talking about the Protestant Reformation of the church. As many of you know, I'm a bit of a lover of history. One might call me a history nerd. And with that comes a love for church history. And as such, I love talking about these things. But to put it simply, it was clear that the church during the late Middle Ages, going into the Renaissance, was in need of great reform. Most of Christianity by that point was centered around Europe. And as you may know, the only really accepted form of Christianity for most people at that time was that as expressed through the Roman Catholic Church. And the church was in bad shape. It was corrupt. Morals of the church leaders were lax. Many of them had concubines and were hanging with prostitutes. A good number of priests never even showed up to their churches. And that was a big problem for people who, from their belief system, believed that only a priest could channel the benefits of God's grace through the sacraments to the people. And if the priest isn't showing up, that's a problem. Many high-ranking church offices were obtained by paying money to the right person. People were not reading the Bible. In fact, the church was discouraging the common person from reading it, if they even could read. They would say, well, the Bible's too complicated for the average person to understand. So we, the leaders of the church, we'll do the heavy lifting for you, and you just do the things we tell you to do. So many, even committed Catholics at that time, believed the church was in need of reform, going before Luther. I think a good picture to use at that time is that the church was like a tree, a really sick tree. And people were looking at this really sick tree and saying, well, it's sick, so what the tree needs is a good pruning, a good trimming, and we'll do that by wiping out corruption. We'll get a better structure in the church. But it would be the reformers, men like Martin Luther, men like John Calvin, who would say, actually, this sick tree doesn't just need a good trimming. We need to cut to the root of that tree. And the root of that sickness is bad teaching, bad theology. You see, the church was teaching that God's grace was something that you earned, that was infused to the believer, gained by the believer by participating in the sacraments of the church, by doing good works, by doing works of mercy. That you could be in a state of grace with God and also fall out of a state of grace with God. And when people died, those out of the church or those who had committed grievous mortal sins without confessing would go to hell. And then there were those who were in the church, but perhaps didn't have enough of God's grace infused into them. So they wouldn't go straight to heaven when they died, but they would spend some time in purgatory to be made ready for heaven. And all of this was causing great anxiety in many of the people. You see, death was all around them. Europe had experienced great plagues. Lifespans were short, and so there was a fear of death. In fact, many of the people at that time saw Jesus not as a gentle shepherd, but as the judge that was going to come for them. Many paintings of Jesus at that time showed him with a knife coming out of his mouth, and many people were scared of Jesus. That's why they were looking to the Virgin Mary to carry their prayers to Jesus. So in the world of that time, we see great anxiety, bad theology, a corrupt church. But you know what? It was going to be fertile ground for God to use some key people, some men of God, to help the church rediscover the gospel, to bring great transformation to the church and bring great transformation to the world.